My name is Emily. When I was 32, my father looked straight at his phone and said, "If you insist on coming home for your mother's birthday, then don't call me your father anymore." All because I wasn't dazzling enough to be introduced to my sister's doctor boyfriend. They were ashamed that I, a tech engineer, couldn't be displayed like a piece of fine jewelry at their garden party. I had quietly paid for their electricity, water, and internet for 3 years, nearly $15,000. No thank you. No check-ins. Have you ever been treated like the extra piece in your own family? Leave a comment if you know that feeling. If you want to know what happened 3 weeks later, on that exact birthday, when everything in their house started shutting off, one by one, then like, subscribe, and join me in the next part of the story. I'll tell you what happened when I stopped staying silent. I don't remember exactly when I started feeling invisible in my own family. Maybe it was when I was 8, when Claire got picked to sing the solo angel part in the church play, and I sat quietly in the back row, holding the prop box. Or maybe it was my 12th birthday, when Mom forgot to buy me a cake because she was too busy worrying about Claire being dumped. I simply whispered, "It's okay, Mom. Too much cake makes you fat anyway." I was never the kind of kid who made others proud in public. I was quiet, introspective, and liked being alone. I didn't know how to laugh loudly or charm people in conversation. Claire was the complete opposite. Radiant, funny, always drawing eyes toward her. At home, whenever guests came over, my mom would call Claire down in a pretty dress and tell me to stay upstairs, unless necessary. When I went to college for engineering, where women made up less than 10%, they barely noticed. But when Claire majored in communications, the whole family threw a party like she'd just been hired by CNN. I wasn't jealous. But some nights I felt like a shadow, walking beside the story of my own life. I never blamed anyone. I chose to express love through actions, not words. When my dad needed heart surgery, Claire was caught in a major deadline. Mom was afraid of hospitals, so I took 2 weeks off work to stay at the hospital with him. I made porridge, washed towels, shaved his face every morning, and recorded all the doctor's notes. My father never said thank you. When he was discharged, I only heard from my mom as a side comment. "Your dad said you take care of things well. Don't bother anyone." That's good. Then the pandemic hit. The little store my parents had run for over a decade had to close. Claire moved in with her boyfriend in Arizona. I stayed in Portland, working remotely from my small apartment. One evening, Mom called. Her voice was small and tired. "The electric bill's high this month, probably because of the heater. Your dad also needs medication, but the pension hasn't come through yet." I asked, "How much do you need?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Not much. Just help me out for a few months. Once Claire marries the doctor, she'll take over." I didn't ask more. I quietly logged into my bank app and set up 3 recurring payments: electric, water, and internet. About $410 a month. I set quarterly reminders to make sure everything stayed on track. At first I thought I'd help for a few months. But 1 month turned into 6. 6 turned into 12. Every time I asked, Mom would say, "Claire's busy with wedding planning, let's not add pressure. Could you help a bit more?" Or, "Your dad's so weak, Emily, he can't handle the power being cut." I had no one to tell. Most of my friends wouldn't understand that kind of unspoken obligation. They're the kind to block their parents for one passive-aggressive Facebook comment. Me? I wasn't hugged or comforted growing up, but I still carried this vague responsibility. I'm their daughter. I have to help. 3 years. Nearly $15,000. No thank you. Not one time did they ask if I was doing okay. I wasn't rich. I lived frugally. No vacations, no dining out. One time when my company cut bonuses during a market downturn, I had to sell my old laptop to cover their bills on time. One time, I asked Mom, "Does Claire help out at all?" She answered, like always, "She's really busy, sweetheart, planning the wedding. Just help us this month, okay?" I don't know when this month became an unspoken rule. I also don't know when I stopped feeling angry and started feeling hollow. There was a time I had a high fever after a work stress episode. I lay curled in bed, unable to get up. No hot water, too exhausted to order food. I texted Mom. "I'm not feeling well, might need a few days. Can you check with Dad for me? I haven't transferred this month's payment yet." She didn't call back. She only texted, "Send it soon, they might cut the modem." I lay there, clutching the phone, staring at that line. I'm worried they'll cut the modem, not, "Are you okay, sweetie?" I needed someone to ask, "Emily, are you okay?" But in 32 years, no one in my family had ever asked me that with honest eyes. Claire still lived like a pampered flower. Every time she broke up with a boyfriend, the whole family called an emergency meeting, worried as if the household depended on her emotional stability. And me? Working since I was 20, sending money every month, never asking for anything, was still called cold, distant, and now, not special enough to stand beside Claire's boyfriend. I no longer cried. Some wounds aren't loud enough to spill tears, but deep enough to sit in your chest for life. I'm not telling this to seek pity. I'm telling you so you'll understand. What happened on that birthday wasn't a sudden breakdown. It was the end of a quiet sacrifice that had lasted 3 years and 30 years before that. And when I chose to stop, that house slipped into darkness. Literally. I couldn't sleep that night. The night my father said if I insisted on coming home for Mom's birthday, I should stop calling him Dad. I sat still in my armchair in my tiny apartment, bathed in soft floor lamp light. The ticking clock on the wall was steady, but inside me was a strange stillness. Not the rage I once imagined when hurt, but a quiet clarity, without bitterness or resistance, like realizing you'd been clinging to a rope that snapped long ago. I set my tea down, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. I wanted to know, precisely, not emotionally, how much I had spent on helping the family. The first transaction dated back to March 5th, 3 years ago. Dwa de la banchin sutan lap. Junwen kya va marchkamshuk. The first transaction dated back to March 5th, 3 years ago. 413 for utilities. Then came 407. Then 421. Some months were higher during winter or heating use, but never late. Not one payment missed. I scrolled to the bottom. That number didn't shock me. It actually felt appropriate, neat, like a clear confirmation that I had done enough. I wasn't using it as proof to claim credit. I needed to know. I didn't owe them anything anymore. I opened the auto payment tab. Each item appeared. Portland Utilities Board, water. Northwest Electric Company. Comcast Internet Plan. I clicked through each one. No hesitation, no doubt. Canceled them all. Like after years of holding the weight, my shoulders finally dropped. I wasn't trying to do the right thing. I no longer needed to be understood. I only wanted to be free. From the role of the daughter who always carried the load while no one asked if she was tired. I stood up, walked into my bedroom, turned off the lights. The room was dark, but it didn't feel cold anymore. The next morning, I got a message from Mom. "Sweetie, the internet bill's here. Could you help cover it? They said it'll be cut off if we don't pay this week." I stared at the message for a long time, then locked my screen. I no longer had the obligation to reply. That afternoon, while in an online meeting with my tech team, my phone rang again. This time, it was my father. I didn't pick up. A few minutes later, a voicemail was left. "Why haven't you paid the electric bill?" "Someone called the house saying this month hasn't been paid." "The internet's lagging, your mom can't get anything done." Call back and take care of this now. Don't make this house look bad in front of the neighbors. I played the voicemail while typing a reply email to a client. Hearing his voice, I felt like I was 17 again, getting scolded at the dinner table for daring to question a book. That tone never changed. Sharp, dry, and leaving no room for refusal. I muted the audio, placed the phone face down on the table, and went back to work. No one in that house realized that, in the very moment they needed me most, they had already cut off the only person who'd quietly stood behind them, asking for nothing in return. I didn't delete the message, didn't block the number. I kept everything. Not as evidence, but so I wouldn't forget how I was treated the moment they thought I no longer had value. I still cooked dinner as usual that night, pasta with spinach and olive oil. I played soft jazz, opened the window, and let the cool April air drift through the room. Nothing was different, except for one thing. I knew I would never pay another bill again. 4 p.m. I sat in my small apartment, holding a cup of cold coffee, its base stained with a dark ring of leftover liquid. Outside the window, the sky was pale gray, and the clouds drifted slowly, as if unsure whether to rain or simply grow colder. Across the city, the beige house I grew up in had its lights on, or rather used to. Today was my mother's birthday. Claire had sent out invitations to over 20 people. The party was set up in the backyard, where Mom had planted lavender and purple daisies. They hired a small event company with a photo backdrop, paper lanterns strung along the white fence, and a Bluetooth speaker preloaded with her favorite easy jazz playlist. I used to think I'd be the one bringing the cake this year. I'd handle the main course, the honey-glazed roast chicken Mom always said I made best. I pictured myself coming early, cleaning the patio, stringing lights along the eaves with Dad like we used to. Instead, I was here, alone. I had been crossed off the guest list before the invitations even went out. Then, at exactly 4:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. The first message came from Mom. "Emily, the power's out. Nothing's working. Can you check on it for me?" I stared at that message, eyes unblinking. No greeting, no concern, no hesitation, as if I were still paying for everything. Right after that, a call came in. From my father. I let it ring 3 times before it went silent. A moment later, a voicemail. I opened it and heard his clipped tone. "The water's out, no one can shower, the stove won't work, call back." "And the internet? Your mother's going nuts." My phone buzzed again, a 3rd time. Claire. I already knew what she'd say. Maybe, "How could you do this?" Or, "Mom's humiliated in front of everyone." Maybe even, "Please fix it for today." 10 minutes later, the calls didn't stop. Messages poured in. An uncle, Mike, texted, "Emily, this isn't cool. Why'd you choose today to make a scene?" An aunt, Linda, wrote, "Your mom's crying in front of everyone. Do you realize you just ruined the whole party?" Then another message. No name, just a number. Claire was right. A daughter like you doesn't belong at a happy occasion. I kept them and stayed silent. Instead, I picked up my cold coffee again and gently swirled it in my hand, as if checking how much memory still settled at the bottom of the cup. And in that moment, I realized all those angry words danced around one single question. Why did everything fall apart the moment I stopped being there? No one asked why the house lost power, lost water, lost internet. No one remembered I'd quietly carried all that for years without one single complaint. They only panicked when the lights stopped glowing, when the Wi-Fi dropped out, when the faucets stopped pouring. And they called my name. Not because they missed me, but because they needed me to function again. Like a switch. If I turned back on, everything would return to order. I got up and moved to the window. The sky outside was growing darker. The first streetlights blinked on, casting a soft yellow streak across the street. I pressed my forehead to the glass, letting the quiet chill of spring touch my skin. It felt like the world was finally mirroring a truth I'd ignored for far too long. And when that truth surfaced, everything else spiraled. No one there said they had spoken too harshly. They needed me to quietly clean up the mess. At the right time, in the right place, without the right to feel disappointed. I was washing dishes after dinner when my phone rang. A video call from Aunt Margaret. I didn't need to see the name. The familiar ringtone from that outdated app only she and I still used. And I already knew. She was the only one in my family who ever called to ask the one question no one else had. How are you? I wiped my hands on a dish towel, hesitated for a moment, then accepted the call. The screen lit up. Her face appeared, tilted slightly from a low camera angle. The kitchen light behind her was soft and golden, a little blurry, making the whole frame feel both familiar and uneasy. I could hear faint background noise, clinking silverware, hollow laughter, my mother repeating her usual line. "Everything's fine." Aunt Margaret looked at me, her eyes softened. "Emily, are you busy?" I shook my head and smiled gently. "I just finished dinner, are you okay?" She didn't get the chance to answer, because from behind her came a voice, sharp and off-key. How much colder can she be? The whole family's embarrassed in front of our guests, and she sits there like a statue. "Claire." Her voice hadn't changed. Dramatic, indignant, and wounded, in the way people are when they're used to always being defended. She hovered behind Aunt Margaret, arms crossed, high bun, smeared makeup, eyes sharp with blame. "You really think I did this out of spite?" I said, my voice calm but clear. "No. I did it because, for once, I chose to live for myself." Claire glared, lips pressed into a hard line, but before she could reply, a figure suddenly appeared in the frame. He lingered behind her, sleeves rolled up, looking unsure whether to step in. Then he spoke. "Emily, boss." The whole frame seemed to freeze. I paused, not because he called me boss, but because of his tone, his expression. It didn't match the eyes of anyone standing near him. I tilted my head to get a better look. It was Dr. Noah Benson, the lead scientist on the molecular biology project our company had been funding. We had never met in person, but I remembered that name very clearly. 3 months ago, Noah had submitted a proposal to adjust the funding structure for the directional protein trial project. His signature was right beneath the report, with a note that read, "Eager for feedback from the board, especially from Ms. Emily Carter, who believed in this direction from the start." I had no idea Noah was Claire's boyfriend. But now, there he was, standing in a chaotic kitchen, looking at me through the screen with an expression that blended confusion, respect, and a hint of suspicion. I didn't say anything, only gave a slight nod, a silent confirmation and greeting. Noah hesitated, then looked around. Their eyes swept across my mother, my father, and stopped on Claire, whose face had flushed red. Then he spoke, his voice low but clear. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You two were sisters." The silence after that sentence was so heavy I could hear the kitchen's exhaust fan humming somewhere in the background. Claire turned to Noah, panic in her eyes. I didn't lie. I hadn't found the right time to introduce her. Noah looked at her without responding. Then, as if remembering something, he looked back up at the screen, his eyes locking on mine. "Thank you for everything you've done for our project. I really admire your leadership and the trust you placed in my team." I nodded slightly, keeping my tone calm. "Hope the party still goes well today." Right then, my mother's voice cut in from the background. "Noah, don't say nonsense. That girl, she's never done anything for anyone. All she knows is how to stay silent and wait to blame others." I saw Claire wince, and Aunt Margaret tried to turn the camera to block out my mother's image. But it was too late. Then my father chimed in, It's not a big deal. She makes a bit of money and thinks she's God. Family is about letting things go. But her, she's petty. I stayed silent. But no, I didn't. He turned around, brow furrowed, then stood up straight and spoke loudly, clearly. With all due respect, Emily isn't just a leader. She's the reason my research team still exists today. And if I had known she was Claire's sister, I would have started questioning a lot of things much earlier. A murmur began to rise in the background. Someone whispered, "Wait, did he just say, Emily is Noah's boss?" Another voice, lower but clearly surprised. "Which Emily? That Emily? You mean the one who invested?" Noah and I locked eyes through the screen. I spoke softly, not mocking, not bitter. "I hope this family introduction didn't make things too awkward for you." "Not at all, actually. I think I just learned something far more valuable." I smiled, said goodbye, then ended the call. I put the phone down. The screen went dark and the room returned to its usual quiet. I leaned gently against the chair, tilting my head toward the open window. Outside, a cool breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's garden. The sky had deepened into slate gray, dotted with the faint gold of street lamps. And I felt at peace. It wasn't about Noah taking my side, or Claire being embarrassed. It was that they had said everything themselves, and I hadn't needed to say a word. For years, I had tried to explain myself, quietly, exhaustingly, and without success. But when I stopped trying, when I stopped chasing validation from people who always turned away, the truth was spoken by someone else. A few hours later, as I was cleaning the kitchen and about to make tea, my phone pinged. A new email. I opened it without thinking much. From Noah Benson. Subject: I owe you an explanation. I pulled out a chair, rested my chin on my hand, and read every word. "Hi, Emily. Tonight was probably strange for you, and honestly for me too. I'm writing this not to win favor, but to preserve respect. I've admired you professionally for a long time. When I was notified that the investment board had approved funding for my project, your name was the first one I noticed on the list. I once told a colleague that having a leader like you behind us was a major source of trust. I didn't know Claire was your sister. In fact, Claire never once mentioned having a sister." I paused. That sentence read lightly, but left a weight in my chest. Never once mentioned having a sister. I didn't expect to be flaunted. But for someone not to even know you exist, even when you're so close, that's something harder to explain than silence. I kept reading. "I'm ending this relationship, not because of pressure, but because I don't want to build a life on top of half-truths. I don't want to start something that's founded on omission and the erasure of others. Thank you for not making me uncomfortable in front of everyone. You handled that moment more graciously than I think anyone else could have." I put the phone down and took a long breath. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. Just quiet, in the right way, like when a crooked coat on a hanger is finally straightened. It's simple, but suddenly the whole room feels cleaner. I pulled a small notepad from the drawer and wrote a few lines by hand, something I rarely did, to preserve the feeling. "Noah, you don't owe me an explanation. But thank you for saying what needed to be said. I don't bring family into business, and I don't ask anyone to pick sides. You have the right to choose a kind path for yourself. And I hope good things come your way, if that's what you choose." I took a picture of the note and emailed it instead of retyping it. There's something about handwriting that still makes people pause and listen. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't from Noah. It was from Claire. "What did you say to him?" "Noah called. He said things should end. I'm sorry if I ever did something wrong. But why would you make him leave me like that?" I didn't reply right away. I got up, poured some water, and watched the lights reflect on the kitchen cabinets. She still didn't get it. She still believed today happened because I said something to Noah. She still thought the unraveling was caused by someone interfering, not by all the things she chose not to see, not to hear, not to say. For years. I opened my phone and typed slowly. Noah didn't leave you because of me. He left because of the way you live, the way you treat people, and the way you always believe that saying something sweet can fix everything the way you want. I didn't write much, no bitterness, just enough for her to understand. If she's willing to read with honesty instead of habit. I hit send, set the phone aside. I didn't know how Claire would react. And I didn't need to. I was wiping down the balcony when the doorbell rang. The sound was long and firm, not like the mailman or a neighbor. I wiped my hands on the towel hanging by the door and stepped out. When I looked through the peephole, I froze. My parents, standing close together, each pulling a small suitcase, their faces hollow and weary. My mother had a light shawl over her head, and my father wore his old baseball cap he always used when traveling. I blinked once, then opened the door. They waited for me to invite them in, as if this visit were the most natural thing in the world. The small suitcase wheels rolled softly across the wooden floor. I closed the door. My apartment wasn't big, but it was tidy, warm, and filled with soft light. The scent of cinnamon and tea still lingered from earlier in the afternoon. On the table, the teapot was still steeping, a faint trail of steam curling up from the lid. We sat down. My father looked around the room, as if evaluating everything, then rested his hands on his knees, fingers interlocked. My mother sat quietly to the side, her eyes avoiding mine. He was the first to speak. We should probably talk. Calmly. He took a deep breath, his voice deeper than usual. We're sorry. What happened on your mother's birthday? We shouldn't have said those things to you. My mother cut in, her voice timid. At that time, everyone was under pressure. Claire had just broken up, the internet was out, the house was dark, and all the guests. She paused. We're family after all. Even if things aren't perfect, we shouldn't turn our backs on each other. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The house is really struggling now. Claire's unemployed. Your mom hasn't slept in days. We don't want to rely on anyone, but if you could help. I lifted my head and looked him straight in the eye. How much? He didn't answer right away. He looked over at my mother. She lowered her head, then spoke quickly, like she was afraid I'd interrupt. If you could help. Around $2,500 a month. Just until things settle down. The words dropped softly, but it was like a bucket of cold water poured into the quiet room. I placed my teacup down on the table. This time, I spoke. So when Claire gets a job again, how much will she contribute? The room grew instantly heavier. My father looked at me as if he didn't understand the question. My mother pressed her lips together, her fingers clenching the edge of her shirt. Claire, she's still not doing well. After the breakup, she's mentally unstable, my mother said softly. I understand. But I want to know, if she gets a job again, how much will she contribute each month? I took a deep breath, then continued, my voice gentle but unwavering. If she agrees to contribute $2,500 a month, then I'll do the same. If not, I need a clear commitment. My mother looked up, confused. What do you mean? I spoke slowly, each word measured. A legal document, signed by both of you, stating that after you pass away, the house in Oak Ridge will belong to me. Entirely. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't bargaining. It was me setting terms. My father stood up abruptly. Clearly, he hadn't expected that. He slammed his hand on the table, making the teacup tremble. You're setting conditions with your own parents? I raised you for 20 years and now you're counting every penny like this? I didn't flinch. My eyes stayed locked on his, not cold, but no longer soft. I'm not counting. I'm asking. If we're family, then where's the fairness? He inhaled sharply, his chest rising and falling. My mother sighed, her voice trembling. Emily, you can't do this. You've always been the thoughtful one. Claire is fragile, you know that. I paused for a beat, then asked, do you remember I was fragile once, too? When I had a 104-degree fever but still sent money so the house could keep the power on? When I was in the hospital alone after knee surgery? Did anyone call to ask if I had eaten? I wasn't trying to claim credit, but I couldn't keep being treated like an emotionless machine. A walking wallet. The default pay now button of the family. I stood up, my voice calm. If you want my help, fine, but I no longer help in silence. And I no longer help unconditionally. They sat there. Two people I had once tried so hard to hold on to with every ounce of loyalty I had. I sat back down, but this time without the heaviness I used to carry. I spoke softly, but every word was deliberate. And yet when I said I would come home early for Mom's birthday, it was Dad who told me not to. It was also Dad who said, if you insist on coming, then stop calling me your father. And even now, no one has apologized for those words. So if I'm not your daughter, then today you came here as what? That question wasn't meant to hurt. It was meant to face a truth they'd never been willing to name. My father stared at me, his eyes wide, then turned to my mother as if looking for help. She said nothing. She just gently squeezed his hand as if to stop him from saying more. Maybe she knew that at this point, no excuse would reach me anymore. I looked at both of them, my hand lightly resting on the armrest. I don't hate you, but I can't keep living as a child raised on guilt. I've done my part, quietly, without complaint. And now, I want to live as an adult and be treated fairly. I walked to the shoe rack, took out 2 pairs of guest slippers, and gently placed them in front of them. I think we should stop here for today. My father said nothing. He stood there, fists clenched. His eyes looked noticeably older under the ceiling light. My mother began to cry. Not loudly, but in silence, as if every tear weighed more than the air around her. I said one final sentence, my voice low and steady. I'm not closing the door, but if you want to come back, then please come with truth, not with pressure or tears. I opened the door. They rolled their suitcases out, the wheels softly clicking against the wooden floor. My father walked out first. My mother followed, still wiping the corners of her eyes. The door closed behind them. No slam, no tension, a long enough silence for me to hear my own heartbeat. I didn't collapse onto the floor like I had after arguments in the past. I didn't cry after seeing my family leave my home. I remained still. And I stopped turning myself into the little girl who always had to be forgiven, even when she did nothing wrong. 2 years have passed since that afternoon I opened the door and watched my parents leave. My apartment is still the same, quiet, full of light, and warm enough not to make the heart feel empty. The wooden table where my father once slammed his hand now holds a vase of dried lavender. The sofa by the window has a new addition, a hand-woven moss-green blanket I brought back from a trip to Vermont. The kitchen corner is still tidy, now with a spice rack I installed myself. Each small jar neatly labeled, partly because I'm naturally meticulous, and partly because I no longer live for anyone but myself. In those 2 years, I haven't received a single call from my parents. No messages, no birthday or Christmas greetings, not even a line saying, "Emily, how are you?" Strangely, I didn't feel let down. I had grown used to their absence long before they actually left my life. The only difference now is I no longer try to compensate for it. I kept the contact, the numbers, the family photos, but I stopped chasing something they never truly gave me. Recognition. I went to work as usual, no longer the girl quietly hunched behind a computer late at night worrying about someone else's bills. I grew vegetables on the balcony, learned to brew tea at the right temperature, and every weekend, I wrote. Not to tell the world how unfairly I had been treated, but to remind myself how I got through those years. I wrote like a personal memo, to remember all the times I tried to be perfect just to be loved. The mornings I skipped breakfast after sending money. The video call where the only person who believed me was someone bound not by blood but by choice. Noah, who walked away from a dishonest relationship before it became a replica of the worn-out patterns in my own family. I wrote about those early evenings after cutting off all financial support, when my heart still felt heavy and unsure. About the first time I dared to say, "I deserve respect." About the stunned looks in my parents' eyes when they realized I wouldn't bow anymore. No one in the family ever asked why I'd changed. They stayed silent, as if not mentioning it would somehow make me return to being the good daughter, obedient, patient, and always available when needed. But the old Emily no longer exists. I didn't change out of revenge. I changed because I was exhausted from living as someone who always had to prove she was worthy, even in the house where she grew up. I used to believe that if I was patient enough, kind enough, and gave enough, one day they'd love me the way I needed to be loved. But it turns out, sacrifice doesn't make people love you more. It makes them believe they're entitled to take without giving anything back. I never asked for the $15,342 I had transferred over 3 years. I didn't demand signatures. I didn't hire a lawyer or post anything online. I did one thing only. I stopped paying with my peace. And miraculously, when I stopped, the world around me softened. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost while chasing duty. I joined a Saturday morning yoga class where I met women also learning how to let go of the burden-bearer role. I read books, not to prove I was good enough, but because I genuinely wanted to understand myself. Each day I lived, I no longer felt drained. There were no more midnight calls begging for emergency transfers, no more guilt-laden texts that made me feel wrong simply for living my own life. The silence between us still remains, but it's no longer one-sided neglect. It's a boundary, consciously set. If one day they wish to come closer, I won't stop them. But this time, I won't take the first step. And I won't stand on the sidelines forever, just waiting to be called by name. Now, I pass through the holiday season with warm meals, pots of green basil on the balcony, and a life where no one exploits kindness and calls it family. I didn't choose bitterness. I chose my worth. And if someone asks whether I feel lonely, perhaps I do, sometimes. But it's a peaceful kind of loneliness, because I finally get to be with the one person I had forgotten for too long. Myself. I don't hope this story makes anyone feel sad. I only hope that if you've ever been in a family dynamic where everything was placed on your shoulders, endurance, obligations, silence, you'll understand the kind of choice I had to make. It's not always easy to tell the difference between love and disguised expectation. And sometimes the most heartbreaking thing isn't rejection, but when the people closest to you treat your kindness as default and your presence as guaranteed. What do you think? If it were you, would you take it all back after all those years of giving? Would you give them another chance? Or choose to walk away as I did? I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share whether it's agreement, disagreement, or a different perspective. Because sometimes we learn the most when we dare to be honest with ourselves and with each other. And if this story resonated with you, even in some small way, consider following the channel to hear more stories like this. Still about family, about choices, about those complex yet irreplaceable ties. Some stories aren't about right or wrong. They're journeys. And every journey deserves to be heard. Thank you for staying with me all the way here. See you on the next road ahead.